Hello, Michael. Good
Hey,
morning
how are
to
you?
you. Good morning,
Good
right?
afternoon to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, thank you so much for coming on my show. And it's
Oh,
such an honor to have a male survivor on my show. You're actually my first male survivor. So,
really?
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And
That's not
that's
great. Yeah.
exactly. And this is why I just feel there is so much more that we need to do to raise the awareness for male survivors to come out and speak up, because it's not only us women that have suffered from sexual abuse. And it would be great to, obviously hear your story, even though
Right.
it's not a great story, I know, but just to help and
Right.
inspire other
Right.
survivors.
Speaking really briefly to what you said, um, under the age of 18, 1 in 6 men
Mm.
suffer sexual abuse. By the time they're past 18, it's 1 in 4, which
Okay.
is the same general statistic for women. They're
Right.
around one
Okay.
in four.
Yeah.
So, and it takes them like 20 to 25 years to admit it, to speak about it. So,
Right.
that may be why male guests are a little harder to find.
Absolutely. And I have been trying to search for some, and it's not as
Right.
easy. It's not as easy because it's
Right.
it's not all out there at the moment. I know it's getting there, especially now with the LGBTQ, is it, community? The acronyms. I can never get those right
Right.
because I know it increases every time, doesn't it? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's growing, which is great. I mean, when I was growing up, that was considered, weird and taboo when you didn't talk
Mm.
about it. My generation was the first generation, Gen X, to learn to accept sort of universally, like, oh, okay, we learned it as we went on.
Yeah.
Millennials seem to grow up understanding
Right.
different sexuality. And then Gen Z is basically like, what even is sexuality? Like anything's anything, like live
Yeah.
your life,
Yeah.
so it's getting, a
Sure.
little better. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, we like that. And this is why the world needs people like yourself, and me to come in and, raise the awareness of the impacts that sexual abuse can have on us.
Exactly.
Um, yeah, so could you tell us about yourself, please, Michael?
Right. Um, so I grew up in the Northeast in the United States. It was a blue collar neighborhood. There were 3 boys in the family.
Mm,
It was an abusive household strictly because of my mother.
okay,
She was mentally, really mentally unstable.
right.
So obviously there was a lot of emotional abuse, but there's some pretty rough physical abuse that went on. Um, she did a lot of letting me know how expensive it was to raise boys, how hard it is, and we're going to make the family end up in the poorhouse, and we're going to be on the streets because we're so difficult. And like a lot of, abusive parents, they pick a favorite. And
Right.
I was unquestionably the favorite to get knocked around one way
Okay.
or another. Um, the one story I like to use to sort of crystallize what it was,
Mm,
um, when I was 9, so that would be like third grade. I got a C in math, which was unacceptable in the household.
oh,
And
okay.
she tried. It was long division, and she was trying to
Right.
teach me long division, and I just wasn't getting it. She got so frustrated with me.
Mm,
She got up and she said, you know, screw this family. I don't want anything to do with it. And she grabbed her car keys and said, when your father gets home, tell him I've left.
right.
I don't, I'm begging, I'm crying, I'm screaming,
Yeah.
for her to come back. And then she'd lock herself in the bedroom and then come out like an hour later, and just like nothing happened, like, oh, hi, sweetie.
Okay.
And,
Mm,
it was a lot of that.
mm.
Um, it got more violent than that for sure.
Yeah.
Well, that was emotional, but yeah, the violence was not great. Um, anyway, so that teaches a kid, that he's not really worth much. So then what
Yeah.
happens is the kid naturally goes looking for attention somewhere. right?
Yeah.
So there were some older guys in the neighborhood, real nice guys, and they sort of took me in, let me play basketball with them, let me hang out with them. But the unfortunate part was I was around them drinking and, smoking weed, and they would show me pornography. And I don't believe there was an ill intent, but, so that starts your engine going. When I was 10, a female babysitter molested me. She would, sit me on her lap and have me look at pornography with her and, rub me into her body, touch my body, that stuff. She would have guys come over, and fool around with them and have me watch,
Goodness. Yeah. How old was she? Sorry.
16.
Okay. So she was just about legal herself, really.
Right. There's a lot of stats about juvenile sexual offenders, and it's shocking the number of women involved in that.
Wow.
Yeah. So that happened, and that sort of, messes you up. And really now the engine's going, right? So I've seen porn since I was a kid. I've been kind of messed around with. Then there was a woman in the neighborhood. I was 14 at the time, and her child, her son, who was 6, would kind of poke around my driveway when I was shooting baskets and wanted to hang out, and he was a lonely kid. And, I had brothers. I had no problem, palling around with him a little bit when he came by, giving him some attention that he needed, only child, single mother. Then his mother, who was 22 or 23 at the time, would come by to pick him up, and that's how it progressed. We started talking. She was also dating one of those older guys from the neighborhood that I had hung out with. He was a really great guy, sort of idolized him.
Okay.
And so through hanging out with him and with the kid, so there was a lot of contact. And then, it just progressed. She would say things like, "Oh, you look so good in your running shorts." I was on the cross country team, which is like, can you imagine being 22, 23 and saying that to even thinking that?
Not even. Oh my goodness.
Completely insane. So that's how the grooming started. Oh, the girls in school must love you. You're so attractive, blah, blah, blah. And then
attention, right? God, at that age.
Which is what the broken kid wants, right? Oh my God, I'm getting attention. And not only that, but it's verging on sexual attention, and it's from a woman. And as a straight guy, I was like, this is kind of cool. It felt good.
Yeah.
And then it started getting into more graphic conversations. Like, I've been thinking, she would first talk about sex and her prowess, and tease me with, "Oh, I was telling the guys at work what great blowjobs I give," and stuff like that.
Oh my goodness.
Right. And then it progressed to, "I had a dream about you. I masturbated to you. I think about you when I'm having sex with my boyfriend. I wish it was you." And then tried to start vilifying him so that I would sort of be on her side and she could pull me in a little more.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So then one day she brought me upstairs and into her apartment and unbuttoned her shirt and exposed herself. And I remember saying, like, I hadn't kissed anybody at that point. And I said, "I don't know even how to kiss." And she said, "There's nothing to it." And she pulled me in, started kissing me. Within like a minute or two, she pulled down my pants and, she went down on me. And then she said, "You shouldn't feel guilty about this. This is a special thing between us." So teaching me that it's okay to break not only the social boundary of, being sexual with an adult, but that betraying a friend, like, none of it matters. There's no lines. you know, do what you want.
Yeah.
So then on Memorial Day weekend, the year I was 14, she brought me into her house, and I was in sort of the hallway in the apartment between the bedrooms, and she, you know, laid me down on my back and got on top of me, you know, and, you know, it didn't last long. I mean, obviously
You were young. Yeah.
yeah, I ejaculated very quickly. She then got off me, walked down the hall to the bathroom, wet a washcloth, tossed it at me, and said, "Get out."
Oh,
So,
no. Okay.
and yet I'm thinking, this is great. We're in love, you know, just great, you know.
You
right?
were, right? First sexual experience. So yeah.
First, oh, she must love me if we're doing this.
Yeah.
And then it kept going on, and there was more sex, and then it was, you know, you're the only good thing.
A relationship.
You know, in my life, I love you, stuff like that. There was a lot of, you know, weird stuff. Like if I was hanging out with her and her boyfriend, like we watched a movie or something, and then she'd walk me to the door and, you know, make out with me for a minute, put my hands on her, you know, do the whole, I wish it was you. That was, you know, just the whole thing.
Yeah.
So then later, she told me that she was also having sex with her ex-husband, who was an IV drug user.
Oh.
And AIDS education was, you know, a big thing then, right?
Yeah.
Which, you know, thankfully. And I was worried about that. And she said, "Well, if you're so worried, just get get a test, get an AIDS test." So I called the local hospital and asked for one. And the nurse said, I can't, because you're underage. You would need your parents' permission, which obviously I couldn't do. Okay. And I remember she was so upset to hear why I needed one. She kept trying to elicit more information, you know, to help me. I wouldn't give her any. And I remember she cried on the phone. Yeah, because she was so, you know, empathetic for what was going on.
Yeah.
So then later, she became pregnant. And so there's three candidates, right? I mean, we never used condoms. Clearly, she didn't use them, you know, with the other two. And basically her position was, even if it turns out to be mine, I will raise it as my boyfriend's and he'll never know.
Right.
So the paternity is unknown. I mean, I want to say she looks like him, the daughter, you know, that was born looks like him, although we have similar qualities, you know, physically.
Okay. Yeah.
And that was weird. So after that, I started getting into, wait, I should mention that she had an adult friend who knew everything about the abuse. Okay. It was a female friend who was around her age, who would encourage it, who would make jokes about it, who would give me tips on how to please a woman,
wow. And you were 14.
Yeah.
Still, yeah.
Yeah. So after all that, like, I think, you know, the boyfriend moved in, the baby was born, you know, about 15 at the time. And I started getting really disruptive behavior around the house. My parents were very concerned. Okay. I wouldn't talk about it. So they brought us to a family counselor. And, you know, they pressured me enough, which understandably, you know, they pressured me enough where I finally admitted, you know, what had gone on. And I got punished. I got grounded. Okay. That's what happened. It was like, I used, you know, the analogy, like as if I was 15, 14 before I had a license, and they caught me joyriding in the family car. You know, you're not old enough to do that yet, so you're in trouble. You're grounded, you know. No adult in that room did anything about it. Like there was no, oh my God, this is wrong. There was no plans to confront my abuser. Certainly no legal action. And it was never spoken of again, like ever once brought up again by my family. They never asked me how I was feeling, anything. Absolutely, absolutely insane. And I can say, if my abuser was a man, my father would have burnt the house down. I mean, he would have gone bananas. If I was a girl,
protection for the
my
daughter.
father would have beaten him to death with his bare hands. I mean, you know, and yet it was just put aside.
Do you feel like because you were a boy that they were blaming you in a sense?
Yeah, it was, well, boys have sex young. You just did it too young. Okay. It wasn't, oh my God, what's going on with this adult in you? None of that.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And granted, people say, oh, that was, 35 years ago, the world was different. I say, no, I don't accept that. If your child, if an adult woman beat the crap out of me, they would have done something about it.
Yeah.
So they just chose not to do anything about this.
Brushed under the carpet.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Then, the drinking started. And
addictions, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I was, smoking weed, drinking a lot, drinking in my room alone.
Yeah.
I was able to get a fake ID. Well, it was a real ID. I went to the Department of Motor Vehicles and had my older brother's information, right? Okay. And they gave me a license with his name, but my photo. I mean, it was a state issued. And then that was it. Like I was cutting school, drinking in bars in like the crappiest parts of town, buying weed in very dangerous areas, drunk all the time. And I never thought about it. I just thought, oh, I'm having fun and I'm drinking. This is kind of grown up, which, also comes from the grown-up guys in the neighborhood and that woman sort of teaching me I can play on the field with adults. Yeah. So to me, it wasn't weird. There was nothing really strange about it. And also, very clearly, I was dealing with the feelings of this abuse that, weren't talked about, but it wasn't conscious, So my mother caught me coming home drunk once and immediately sent me to alcohol counseling. Okay. Does that sound weird? I mean, they didn't send me to counseling because I was raped and everything that happened. They sent me to counseling because I showed up. Right. Which, it's cool. You want to take care of your kid. You think they have a problem? Absolutely. But to do that and having ignored the bigger issue was completely, utterly insane. Then things went off the rails. Suicidality came in, had a rifle,
Wow. How old were you when you had suicide attempt?
Maybe 16.
So young.
Yeah. So I loaded the rifle and was, the barrel, the gun in my mouth. And I didn't do it, obviously. And I remember going downstairs to the living room where my mother was watching TV on the couch. And I was crying and shaking. I mean, I was having an absolute breakdown. I mean, and I was out of control. And all she did was mute the TV and say, it's going to be all right. And that was it. Never got off the couch, never comforted me. I mean, that was that. She couldn't be bothered. So I started vandalizing. I started being really reckless behind the wheel. A friend of mine and I would drive down to his dad's beach house off season when it was empty to go get drunk. And we would take turns driving and close our eyes to see who could close their eyes the longest, who was less afraid,
Oh
in a dark
yeah,
sort of
reckless
highway.
behavior. Yeah.
Danger. I mean, that is so dangerous to other people, let alone myself. Like, whatever, I'm taking the risk, but I could have harmed people, and that is horrible. In fact, all the driving while drunk stuff that I've done is, I'm mortified when I think back on it, that I could have destroyed a family, killed someone.
Absolutely, yeah. But
I mean, it's harm.
It's just the major consequence of sexual abuse,
Yeah.
It happens to a majority of us. I experience the same. Reckless behavior, just quite a selfish approach where you're just thinking about yourself. You're not thinking about anyone else who may be involved.
Right. Sexually abused people are twice as likely to have substance abuse problems. Sexually abused boys are 15 times more likely to make suicidal plans.
Okay.
And 10 times more likely, when compared with the general population, to attempt suicide. So, yeah, you're right. The numbers are insane. And when I look at all the stuff that I was researching, it was a chart of my life. I mean, every single key that these researchers had come up with about negative consequences, I fit every single one, no matter which study I looked at. So then after high school, I made the completely predictable decision of going into the bar business, and reckless behavior. But you're also in an environment where everybody's drunk all the time, including absolutely. The staff, right? So now you don't think it's weird that you're, that you're drunk behind the bar, that you're wasted on a Tuesday afternoon. Like, none of it's weird, because in comparison to everyone you're working with, everyone is having sex with each other. Yeah. Everyone is using drugs, and everyone's drunk all the time.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, most people get out at some point, leave the bar business pretty young. I stayed in it for 27 years.
Wow.
And it just got worse and worse and worse. And I was involved in very risky sexual behavior. I was having sex with everybody, and every woman that I possibly could, and it was getting weirder and more dangerous. So I was finding myself in very precarious situations. I was losing my mind. I became paranoid. I became, I couldn't do anything. I wouldn't even go into the bar that I owned because I couldn't get off the couch. I couldn't do anything. I just wanted to stay home and drink. And then when I did get drunk at my bar, I'd have a door guy drive me home, which was, pretty common. So after, all of that, well, my father died very suddenly when I was 22.
Okay.
And that sort of taught me nothing matters. Good behavior is not rewarded, with the exception of not sticking up for me on the sexual abuse. My father was tremendous, great guy, loved him dearly. We had a very special relationship. And he worked hard, and he took care of his family, and he was loving. People adored him. And so he could die young, then what the hell? There's no rules, because there's no benefit. All that stuff you're taught, as a kid, that good behavior and if you're religious, it's very common. So I started really coming off the rails, and it amped up. And then cut to a long time later, I became a foster parent, and I fostered a newborn who was born 2 months premature and addicted to heroin.
Wow.
And it was a very difficult, trying situation. I was trying to get help from, DCYF, from the social workers, from people assigned to the case. No one would help this kid. I mean, they assigned me to a physician who stated she'd never dealt with a child going through withdrawal. So, where were we going to get help? The social worker admitted that she had no idea how to tell if someone was using heroin. So she couldn't check on the parents. I had to teach her what to look for. I was getting no help.
How did you identify that the child was an addict?
Oh, I was told, like, he was born prematurely because his mother used heroin while she was pregnant.
Right.
And, he needed special care. And quite frankly, no one should have given me charge of this child. You need a background and an education to work with, these children. They literally cannot be put down. You have to hold them all the time.
Wow.
They absolutely come undone. The screams that came out of this child, I've never heard come out of a human being.
Really?
Oh yeah. They get skin tear all over their body. It's an utter disaster. I had to take him within 12 hours of having him. I had to rush him to the emergency room. He had gone cyanotic. That happened, a couple times, and still no help. So I got him an attorney through the Office of the Child Advocate, and then he went into specialized care and back to his mother. So all that happened, and I want to be very clear: all my drinking, all my drug use, all the crazy sex stuff, me being a horrible person, that's on me. I own that, and I'm in no way saying, this caused me. But after seeing that, mixed with, hey, my father died very suddenly, there's no payoff to being a good guy, with we can't even get behind protecting. So I want to be clear that all my substance abuse, all my drinking, all the drugs, all the sexual compulsivity, and me being a generally horrible person a lot of the time is 100% on me. I don't blame anyone. I don't blame anything else. Certainly, maybe as a teen, right, after that abuse, but certainly as an adult, I own all of that responsibility.
Yeah.
But I will say, seeing my father die like that, and like I said, there's no sort of reward for being a nice person, being a good person, like we were taught as kids, and then seeing this kid go through this and no one would help him. And if we can't get behind protecting drug addicted newborns, then what the hell are we doing? And at that point, as damaged as I was as a person, I just said, okay, none of this matters. Nothing matters.
Yeah.
And with that came severe recklessness, very, very dangerous behavior. And drinking just increased. I wouldn't eat for days. I would just drink. Sex was, not healthy. So I then drank myself out of my business, lost my house, and was living in a friend's garage.
Okay.
Then, there was one window, I blacked it out, and I would just sit in there and drink and drink and drink and use drugs. And it started happening where I would just pass out no matter what time of day, wake up and start doing it again. So one weekend, I think it was a holiday weekend. I can't remember. No, it wasn't a holiday weekend. I spent 2 or 3 days drinking more than I ever have in my life. And make no mistake, I could drink Ireland under the table at that point, right? I was just pure maniac. And then I crushed up 40 milligrams of Xanax.
Wow.
And thought, this would be a good time to check out, right? I had so much alcohol in my system, and that 40 milligrams would have probably put me out. I didn't go through with it. I don't know how. I think I called for help or something, or I was incoherent. I made a phone call, I think, to say goodbye. I just remember the police banging on the door, and they busted in and pulled me out and put me in an ambulance, which certainly wasn't the first time I was in police custody, and absolutely not the first time I was in the back of an ambulance. They took me to the hospital, and I was then committed to the psychiatric ward. And then I was shipped off to rehab. So I will say the best thing about rehab is that you get 4 weeks sober, which when does that happen, right? When in my lifetime, 29 years of drinking, never been 4 weeks sober. I mean, that helps at least get it out of your system. You're still an absolute mess. Right. Your brain is trashed. Your body is trashed. Everything about you is damaged at that point. You experience anhedonia, where you find no pleasure in anything. You're dead inside. And then you're super medicated, and you crave carbohydrates all the time, like sugar. It was, and then you also hear stories that are so horrible that you can't quite wrap your head around it. So what they don't tell you about rehab is when you get out, at least for me, your life gets exponentially worse, because now you have to clean up the mess that you've made. Now I couldn't live in my friend's garage because of what I had done. Okay. Right. So now I'm homeless.
God.
Luckily, someone from rehab took me in for a little bit. And then, when that time was up, again, I had nowhere to go. So I had to go to my mother's, which, on the surface is very embarrassing for a guy who's 45 and had been very, very successful. Also, she's the woman who first started destroying me, right? I mean, she's just a terrible human being. So, I'm sleeping on this filthy carpet in this terrible place with her. I was luckily able to keep my job. So I had gotten another job, after the bar business. They were kind enough to let me stay. I was commuting 4 hours a day to get to this job, and then coming home to that situation with my mother, and depression just got worse and worse and worse. I then was able to get out of that situation. And a year or so after that, I started therapy because I was having profound panic attacks. They were concurrent, and suicidal ideation every day. There's this mantra that kept, and sometimes is still there, that keeps rattling around that says, you're nothing, you're no one, you should just kill yourself. You should have killed yourself, over and over. So I went, into therapy, and through that, I was shown how much the sexual abuse had impacted me. Because again, I had never connected it because it was never talked about. I was just punished for it. No one said it was wrong. And I started to see that. So I went to file criminal charges, right? Because sometimes the statute of limitations effect in the state where this happened, they give you 35 years after the age of 18 to report it. So I reported it. I met with the SVU detectives, had a long interview, wrote at their request, wrote an incredibly detailed account of the abuse. And they asked for the names of everyone personal contacts and medical professionals I ever told about this abuse over, the last 35 years. A couple days later, the detective called me and said the AG won't press charges. And he said, the AG said, it's because I was 14 and not 13, and the sex was consensual.
Right. Wow.
How do you call it consensual? I was 2 years under the age of legal consent. And why does 6 months, 14 to 13, a year, how does that change anything?
Wow.
So then I tried to find attorneys, at least, okay, maybe there's a civil case in here, at least hold her accountable.
Yeah.
But I know, this woman doesn't have any money. I looked her up online and, she does, so there'd be no money in it for an attorney.
Right.
And I would tell them, hey, you can keep all the money. I don't care about it, whatever you get. And it became apparent that while they all said I have a very good case, I made the mistake of being raped by a woman who wasn't wealthy. And I made the mistake of being raped by a woman when I was 14 and not 13. So
wow.
Then I became enraged and I had to do something with it. So I started investigating this stuff and wanted to put together sort of just some information, just so I can understand. And then I sent, and then I saw that, media doesn't really report it. It's a boy and it's a woman. I read all these statistics about it. So I sent an ungodly number of letters to reporters all over, right? I'm talking, this is going to make me sound insane. I swear to you, I was data gathering. I wasn't like, having some sort of crazy compulsive behavior. This was me saying, I'm going to send out hundreds of letters, right? Hundreds, and see what I get. Nothing. I'm like, okay, so this confirms the data that I'm reading. So I then decided to put all this stuff together. I created Silenced by Stigma, and it's really in the infancy stage. I'm about a month in at this point, but a lot of people want to talk about it. I've already booked several interviews, which is great. I want to get it out there, build some momentum. I want it to be a place where men can understand they're not alone, where women can understand that this, this also happens to men. There's understanding from either side. We're inextricably linked, right? So you both of you have to understand it, just like we have to protect boys because we need to make better boys, because then that helps everybody. It helps women, it helps men. The ideal goal is to lobby to change the laws where I come from. And the state where this abuse happened is the only state in the country that allows unrestricted incest at age 16. Only one.
Wow.
New Jersey allows it at 18. They're the only two where incest is legal. State where I come from, it's legal for a 14-year-old student to agree to sexual touching by a teacher.
Wow.
It's legal for sexual penetration once they're 16 by a teacher. These things are insane. And the statute of limitations makes no sense, but how you can discern third degree from first degree based on age, why there's such a drastic third degree rape, which is what I fell into because of my age, has a 3-year statute of limitations in that state. The first degree is the one where you get 35 years after the age of 18. And given what I said, that Dr. Joan Cook had research that it takes a man an average of 20 to 25 years. If you were raped at 14 and you wait 20 years, or you even wait 4 years to come forward.
It's basically what you're doing in that those 25 years. It's the consequences that trauma will have on you.
Oh yeah. The health outcomes are insane. Aside from suicidality and substance abuse, There is an incredible uptick in borderline personality disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, somatoform disorder, where essentially you are convinced you have a physical illness, you behave like you do, you're convinced it is, you feel symptoms, but there's none. There's no physical ailment.
Wow.
Heart problems, any neurological problem that you can think of. There's problems communicating, regulating emotion. So you're in hyperarousal all the time. All the cortisol that runs through your system, the fight or flight, right, is toxic. It's absolutely toxic, especially when you're young. And then what happens to you as a result of that is you're unable to discern a real threat from an innocuous one. So that keeps you in that cortisol flooding state. So yeah, the health outcomes are ridiculous. 80% of male sexual abuse victims are divorced.
Okay.
I mean, come on.
Yeah.
So
exactly. Well, yeah, I mean, if you look at women, who are obviously struggling from the traumas of being sexually abused when they were younger, like including myself, it's the ability to trust and the ability to form stable relationships. And I know in my circumstance is the fact that, a stable relationship can seem quite boring, because we always want that challenge, that excitement, fight or flight, right? Adrenaline.
Right. Yeah. Groucho Marx is quoted as saying, I would never join a club that would have me as a member. Right. I'm so on your side with that. The few women who've been tremendous in my life, who've actually loved me. Yeah. I found them boring.
Yeah. What's this?
Right.
It's terrible.
It's completely insane. But I mean, that's what happens. There's a poverty cycle for people who've been sexually abused because they're doing crazy things. They have professional problems. They have interpersonal problems, obviously. You're just, but I don't want to make it sound like you're screwed. Okay, you were sexually abused, pack it in, go live in a cave, and that's the end of it.
Deal with it.
Just suck it up and accept that your life sucks from now until you die. And according to the statistics, you're going to die early. So mazel tov, live your life, right? So there is a way to handle this stuff, right? Therapy, obviously. If your therapist doesn't work for you, you're not clicking with them, find another therapist. Make sure it's someone who specializes in sexual abuse. They often also have a lot of training in substance abuse, again, because they're so connected. Keep working on that. Some people find groups like AA and NA, and there are sexual abuse groups. AA was very helpful to me for the first year when I became sober, and after I, been fine, 4 years, no problems. Get a psychiatrist. If your therapist thinks that you need medication, get a psychiatrist, because what you've done to yourself with substance abuse and what people have done to you with any kind of abuse has rewired your brain, and you need help with that. So in the beginning, I was very reticent to take medication. And the irony was, I was saying, I don't know if I want to put that in my body.
Oh, right? Goodness. Yeah.
I would drink, a liter of scotch and pop Xanax like they were Tic Tacs, and then have unprotected sex with any woman I met anywhere. And yet I'm saying, I'm not so sure that this antidepressant
medication,
completely mental. Then you have to find medication that works. And, that's something I go through. I have a pretty gnarly diagnosis of mental health disorders, and you gotta work on it. And then the other thing I would say is you have to do something with your rage. You first have to acknowledge it, and then you have to do something with it. And some people it's working out. It happens with a lot of sober people, right? They become, gym junkies. For some people, it's picking up a hobby. And for me, it's ringing every bell I can to talk about this problem,
wow.
specifically men abused, by women, which is very often dismissed and set aside. So
yeah, and those stats are so interesting. I'm so glad that you've raised them, and the concerns regarding, what's happening with the authorities. It's just ridiculous.
oh, forget about it. I have some here. I'm going to look at this sheet because there's too many. I have too many things. So in terms of reporting, right, obviously men do it a lot less. There's statistical evidence to prove that clinicians and law enforcement do not take it seriously. Law enforcement is far less likely to charge a female abuser than a male. Right. And even healthcare professionals don't do it. Now, there's this thing in one of the studies. They said one patient told us that when he spoke to his therapist about his sexual abuse, the therapist said, "I hope you're not one of those homosexuals who are going to waste my time telling me about imagined abuse."
Oh my goodness. Okay.
And then the sentencing for women, the way it's looked at, like Deborah Lefebvre was this famous case here in America. She was a teacher in Florida who had sex with one of her students, underage student, and her lawyer said to place her in a woman's penitentiary because she's so attractive, it would be like throwing meat to the lions, right? Could you imagine some great looking guy that would get spoken about like that?
No.
There's plenty of reports on how the media portrays them, that they're referred to sometimes as bombshells. They it's referred to as a romp. Female sexual offenders, in 29 newspaper articles published in Australian dailies, female sexual offenders were described in a sympathetic way. They also contain excuses to justify their behavior. And they're very often spoken, the more physically attractive the female sexual offender is viewed, the less people think of it as a crime. Now, these are all studies. So this isn't just me saying this.
Yeah. And to be honest, because when you look at sociopathic, disorders and narcissism in particular, a lot of them tend to be good looking, and it makes you think why they all get away with, whatever abuse that they're, undergoing with their partners. I know from first-hand experience with a couple of narcissists that I had, as soon as the police knocks on the door and they see them, it's like automatically they're charmed.
Right. Yeah. Teachers, it's been proven that teachers are more responsive in a positive way to students who are attractive. Yeah. And I guess, it is human nature. I'm not just picking on students, but one of the reasons female sexual offenders are more apt to get away with it is even the typology that they talk about. They call the teacher lover typology. Teacher lover. That's such a strange way to talk about it. And the women that fit this typology, they pick troublemakers because they're less likely to be believed. And speaking of narcissism, there's a group, and I want to say, when I read this, I immediately shut my laptop, walked out the door, got in my car, and had to drive because this upset me in a way that I cannot explain. There's something called the mother molester, okay? Where when they're molesting their daughters, it's jealousy. It's because they're jealous of the attention the daughter gets. So it's a punishment. It's all narcissism. If a child is sexually abused, the sexual offender is 4.5 times more likely to be a woman. So women do the the incestual molestation to an extraordinary degree.
Wow.
Yeah.
It is. And I think the underlying kind of issue here is the power and control, right?
Always. It's that they feel, so a lot of these women feel that they're not in control in their relationships. They conform to more, sort of classic patriarchal gender roles.
Yeah.
So they seize control in these ways by having control over control over a minor. It's insane. And then juveniles. I just want to state that this doesn't just happen. So juvenile sexual offenders are unbelievably prevalent. Of juvenile sexual offenders, 32% are girls and 14% are boys that abused before the age of 12. Okay. And then it goes into college. 43% of men reported they were sexually coerced into sex, 95% of whom said they only had female perpetrators.
Wow.
Yeah. I know I'm being boring. I can just keep rattling off.
It's interesting. No, thank you so much for bringing light to this, because as I say, it's the first time that we're hearing of these stats. It's the first time that, that I have a male survivor on my show. And I salute you for your journey and just how far you've come today and the fact that you are now sober.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, 4 years.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't really miss it. Although I kind of avoid places where it's a big deal. And that's just because speaking to someone who's drunk is awful. It's just boring. Yeah. It's obnoxious. They have nothing to say. They say a lot, but they're really saying nothing. And I want nothing to do with it.
Wow. Yeah. So, and do you find it's your mindset that's just so clear now, and your obviously mental health, the most important thing, right?
Right. So I have a couple mental health professionals that I see regularly, and I take a fistful of pills every day, right? And whatever it takes. I mean, I've got 100 things wrong with me, in terms of mental health. Fine. Look, that's the way it is, right? If I was diabetic, I'd have to do certain things every day. This is no different. Although there's more of a stigma attached to it, but anger is a great motivator. It really, really is. And that's, I'm not viscerally angry at the abuse that happened to me. I wanted to do something positive with it. I'm viscerally angry at the stuff I'm researching and finding.
Yeah.
So
probably the fact that there was no justice either.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And the perception of it. So on Twitter, right? On what I like to call sexual abuse Twitter, there's a huge sort of cadre of people all trying to do a good thing. And I was first worried that it wasn't going to be received very well, because obviously men commit the vast majority of sexual offenses. Women commit about 15 to 20%, which leaves a lot that are men. And I thought it was going to kind of be met with ire, quite frankly. But I came to discover most of the leading researchers are women, and the women on Twitter have been incredibly supportive. Yeah. Although there was a child abuse advocate, who I had posted a stat from the CDC from a nationwide study that took them 2 years about domestic partner violence. Yeah. And what they found was that 1 in 7 men suffer severe physical abuse by their partner in their lifetime.
Wow.
I posted this up with a link to the study, which I always do. Yeah. This woman basically said, "This isn't true. You're spreading lies." And she referred to them as so-called studies, right? So it's one of those people who think they know better than a team of professionals, which we're finding out in the world, obviously, when it comes to how some people are treating COVID.
Yeah, so true. So true. Wow. It's like a bit of an awakening at the moment happening.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Well, think about it. Like 50 years ago, you wouldn't know everything that happens in Kansas while you're living in England, right? But if there's something that happens in Kansas, now it's all over the internet.
Yeah.
And with, you know, and with that comes finding out what everybody thinks about something.
Yeah.
And it turns out most of us are stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Right.
agree with that. Majority of us are sheep, we're just followers, aren't we?
Right. And what's dangerous about someone being stupid is they think that they're right.
Oh.
Right. So if I come across something and say, I'm not a smart man. If you saw my GPA from high school, you'd think I suffered head trauma. Right.
Okay.
But the stuff that I'm researching, and so now I have an opinion about it. But when I come across something that contradicts what I think, obviously, I now look at that and I don't dismiss it. But some people believe in the face of overwhelming research that they're right.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And so your channels, if you want to share them with my listeners, so where we can.
Oh, right. So on Twitter, I'm at SB Stigma.
Okay.
So you can find me on Twitter at SB Stigma and on Instagram at Silenced by Stigma. Mm-hmm. Also on Facebook at Silenced by Stigma. I do have a website, silencedbystigma.org. However, it's not up yet because I'm trying to build it, and it turns out I'm terrible at that. Oh my God. So that might take a minute, but really the info is that I'd be presenting is all on those pages as of now. I'd like to do more with the site moving forward.
Oh, excellent. And that was going to be my next question is, what's your plans for the future to make this change?
Right. So I want to be able to gather enough momentum in any way possible to not only help men, have a safe place to land, to help people understand that this happens and that it's very serious. But ideally, I want to change the laws in the state where this happened.
Wow.
But that's very difficult because remember I said about the teachers, right? 14, they can touch, and 16, they can penetrate. Nobody's going to change that law because you can't get reelected without the teachers union. Ooh, right. So I want to bang some heads, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go full Italian American on them and see what I can do.
I was going to ask your ethnic background, Italian, right?
Right. Well, I'm actually half Armenian.
Oh, okay.
Nice. Yeah. Good. And then a quarter Italian and a quarter French. And
wow. Okay.
And yourself?
Oh, Indian.
Yeah. I mean, heritage. I love the name, the first name.
Thank you.
And I was kind of annoyed we were doing a video cast because I understand you're a model, and compared with you on this video, I look like a gargoyle. So
you look really smart with your shirt.
Unfair. So
says you. Oh God, don't, I'm blushing. But no model hair. No, I'm here like you. I am here to be the change.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Oh, it's a good thing. And glad we have people like you. We need more of you. Push hard, have more men on, if you can stand to talk to me again, which I realize is exhausting.
I've enjoyed it.
I'll come back anytime and talk about this stuff, anything. We got to ring some bells here. Yeah. And thank you for doing that.
Yeah, because it's the impact that it has on us. I just feel that at the moment still, it's not that out there, and we need to raise the awareness. All the drug addicts and the alcohol abusers and sex addicts, there's an underlying issue from childhood.
Right. And what we're doing is, by not discussing this, specifically men, not that this isn't a huge problem for women. I'm just researching, men. And what we're doing is, by pushing that under the rug or not saying, oh, a woman sexually abused you, that's, no big deal. We're sending confused, angry, alcoholic, suicidal men out into the world who are wholly incapable of being loved or loving in return. Like, we're sending people who are dangerous out into the world because of this. And I was dangerous.
Yeah.
But now I'm old, so I'm not dangerous anymore.
Yeah. Well, because you're sober and you're on a healing journey.
Yes. Yeah.
And, and I think it's very important that, you do remain out there. You start your own podcast as well, hopefully.
Yeah, I'd like that very much. I'll have you on as my first guest.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely. Why not?
Oh, no, thank you so much again for sharing your story with my listeners, and for obviously sharing important stats with us, which, I feel that we all need to understand more, that men are abused, and, it is a pandemic out there, and we do need to raise the awareness. And so I do hope, listeners, I do hope that you enjoyed this episode. And again, it's been an honor to have you on, Michael. And please do get in touch with myself or Michael through his social media channels and his website. Once it's up, I'll add the links in my profile and on the description from whichever platform that you're currently watching or listening to this from, either YouTube or podcast. And I look forward to seeing you all on my next show, everybody. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you. It was a privilege. You too.
Thank you. Stay blessed.